Hi, this is Father Brad Hagelin. I'm at St. Luke Parish in Shoreline, just north of Seattle. And the question that I have to answer today is whether Catholics believe in predestination. The answer to whether Catholics believe in predestination is yes. Catholics do believe in predestination. But we have to qualify that because we mean something very different than what many of our Protestant brothers and sisters believe about predestination. For a Catholic, for predestination means that yes, we believe that God knows who will go to heaven and who will go to hell. But what we do not mean by predestination is John Calvin, the Swiss Protestant reformer John Calvin's position, that not just does God know who's going to heaven and hell, but that he causes some people to go to heaven and some people to go to hell. That's a position that Catholics reject. Now, my professor in seminary, Dr. Paul Hilliard, used a really good example to kind of get at the way God's grace operates, especially as we talk about eternal life. The example he uses is to picture yourself on the shore of a large lake. So you're on the shore there, on one side of the lake. There's a very large lake there, and you want to get to the other shore. So this shore represents kind of the starting point. Getting over the water is the journey, and the other shore represents heaven. The most extreme position that could be taken would be that you're on the shore and you see a rowboat, and your job then is to row yourself over the lake to the other side. In other words, you're kind of working your way to heaven by your own will. This position is condemned by the Church. It was held by a priest in the late 300s named Pelagius, and the heresy named after him is Pelagianism. We reject that idea that somehow we earn or work our way to God's salvation, basically by the effort of our own will. Now, the other extreme position is the position taken up by John Calvin and many modern American Protestants. That position is, okay, you find yourself on the shore, you need to get to the other shore. What happens is, for the person who's going to be saved, God picks that person up and puts them on a sailboat, not a rowboat now, but a sailboat, and basically lashes that person to the mast so that they're kind of stuck there on the boat. God's grace kind of blows that person over to the other shore to get to heaven, and there's really nothing that person can do. They can't jump off, they can't affect the course of the boat at all. Basically, God chooses some people to be saved, and whether they like it or not, they're going to be saved. So that's the extreme position represented there. Now, John Calvin would say probably that not that many people are actually getting to heaven. More progressive traditions within Protestantism would say everyone's getting to heaven, and that's basically how they get there. It's completely God's work and God's grace. We do nothing. Now, the Catholic position is neither of these extremes, neither Pelagius' position nor Calvin's position, though the Catholic position, admittedly, is much closer to Calvin's position than it is to Pelagius. Think about it this way. Yes, it is a sailboat, it's not a rowboat. We don't get to heaven by our own effort. But here's the difference. For a Catholic, they're basically picked up and placed on the sailboat by baptism. Baptism gets us on the journey, and it's still completely God's grace that gets us there. The difference is, unlike Odysseus, who was kind of taped to the mast of the boat so he couldn't jump off and swim with the sirens, we're not stuck there. We're not tied to the mast. And so, yes, it is God's grace to get us on the journey and to get us to the other side. The difference for a Catholic is we can jump off the boat and swim with the sharks. So that's kind of a way that Dr. Hilliard gets at the different positions. Now, the fundamental question in all of this that underlies it, predestination is just the question about how God's grace works when we think about eternal life. But the underlying question that connects with all of this, that connects with all of us on a daily basis, is the question of God's grace, His help, His action in our life. Can we resist it or can we not? Does God's grace automatically do what it intends? Or does it require on our part something, our cooperation or something? The Catholic position is the latter. God offers His offer of grace, but we have to cooperate with it. His hand is out, He does all the work to pull us in, but it's still completely God's work, but we cooperate in some way, both in the ordinary graces of our life and in terms of eternal life. How that works, we don't know. It's kind of a paradox between God's agency and human freedom. All we know is that we reject the position of Calvin that we really that those those who are elect or predestined, that God chooses some to be damned and some to be saved, and he gives graces to those who are going to be saved and denies graces to those that are damned. God wills that every single person be saved in the Catholic perspective, but in some way we can reject that offer of grace, and some presumably do end up rejecting that offer of grace. So that's kind of a way to look at it. If your head's spinning about all of this, it should be. In a certain way, the last great controversy in dogmatic or systematic theology were the great debates in the 1600s between the followers of a Jesuit priest, Molina, and the followers of St. Thomas Aquinas. And really, they battled back and forth about this. How does God's grace relate to human freedom? The church ended up calling a truce and said, we don't know. God's grace relates to human freedom in a way that's mysterious, and we don't really know, but we trust that God is good. He wants everyone to be saved. But the way in which his will works in tandem with our freedom is kind of a mystery.